This doesn't change anything, Falco. I'm an all-pro quarterback. I got 2 Super Bowl rings.
And you'll never be more than a replacement player.
You're not real players. That this isn't a real team. And I say that is bullshit, because as of today, you're all professional football players.
Pain heals. Chicks dig scars. Glory lasts forever.
Pain heals. Chicks dig scars. Glory lasts forever. You've heard those words. Maybe you've repeated them. Maybe they hit you somewhere deep the first time Shane Falco said them in that locker room. But here's the thing. The movie that gave you that line was hiding an avalanche of secrets that most fans never even came close to discovering. And today, every single one of those secrets gets exposed. The Replacements, released in the summer of 2000, looked like a straightforward Hollywood sports comedy. Keanu Reeves throwing footballs, Gene Hackman barking orders, a ragtag team of misfits fighting for a second chance. Simple enough, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Because behind every scene of that film, something wild was happening. Something the production team never publicized. Something the NFL desperately wanted to keep buried, and something that makes this movie hit completely differently once you know it. We are going through 21 insane facts about The Replacements that most fans have never heard. By the time we reach number 1, you are going to look at this film in a brand new way. So, let's get into it. Fact 21. The opening line was never in the original script. We start with the one thing every fan quotes: pain heals. Chicks dig scars. Glory lasts forever. That iconic line, the emotional backbone of the entire film, was not sitting in the original screenplay, waiting to be discovered. It was developed during the creative process as the writers and producers worked to find the emotional heartbeat of the story. Think about that for a second. The most quotable, most memorable, most widely shared moment in a film that has been referenced in locker rooms, gyms, and motivational speeches across 2 decades almost did not exist. It was forged in the middle of production. That is how close the world came to never having it. Fact 20. The film was shot during a real period of NFL labor tension. Here is something that adds a layer most viewers completely miss. The Replacements was filmed during a period when labor relations in the NFL were still a sensitive and unresolved conversation. The 1987 strike had left wounds that had not fully healed by the time this movie went into production in 1999. Players still felt the sting of what had happened during that season. Team owners had memories they were not eager to revisit, so when a major Hollywood studio started developing a comedy built directly on the bones of that strike, the entire league felt it. That tension is not just behind-the-scenes trivia. It directly shaped every creative decision the filmmakers made, from casting to stadium access to the name of the fictional league itself. Fact 19. Writer Vince McEwen went through multiple complete rewrites. The script for The Replacements did not arrive polished and ready to shoot. Writer Vince McEwen went through numerous full rewrites before the final version reached the screen. And the direction of those rewrites is fascinating. Early drafts leaned harder into pure comedy, treating the replacement players almost as pure clowns. But as the script evolved, something shifted. The characters started to develop real emotional weight. The misfits became people with genuine backstories, genuine pain, and genuine desire to prove something. The story pivoted from a comedy about underdogs being funny to a story about underdogs being human. That shift is why the film still resonates more than 20 years later. Funny movies come and go. Movies about people desperate for one more chance stay with you. Fact 18. The cheerleader bar scene was a late addition that changed everything. One of the most memorable sequences in the film, the bar scene where the replacement players and the cheerleaders collide in one beautiful collision of chaos, was not in the original script. It was added during the rewrite process, and it completely transformed the texture of the movie. Before that scene existed, the film was primarily about what happened on the field. After the scene was written in, the movie suddenly had a pulse off the field too. You saw who these players were when nobody was watching, when the pressure was off, when they were just being themselves, messy, loud, real, and ridiculous. The bar scene alongside the jail dance sequence and the locker room moments gave this motley crew a humanity that pure sports action never could. If that scene had never been written, the movie would have been a footnote. With it, the movie became a cult classic. Fact 17. Keanu Reeves trained with a former NFL quarterback for 3 weeks. Before a single camera rolled, Keanu Reeves was already on a football field, and not just loosely tossing a ball around to get comfortable for the cameras. He underwent a genuine 3-week training camp that mirrored what real NFL prospects go through. He worked with a former professional quarterback and a college coach. He learned how to call plays from under center with the correct terminology. He drilled 3-step drops, 5-step drops, and 7-step drops until they were second nature. He practiced holding the ball for field goals. He ran through pass routes with receivers. He studied huddle dynamics, including the unwritten rules about how teammates respond when a quarterback misfires. And here is the part that stops people cold. This was a man who had undergone neck fusion surgery years before. He was stepping into a physically brutal training environment with a neck that had already been through serious surgical intervention. And he did it anyway because he refused to look like an actor pretending to be a quarterback. He wanted to look like the real thing. And by every account, he did. Fact 16. Reeves sustained a real stinger injury during practice. The training was not consequence-free. During those grueling practice sessions, Keanu Reeves took real hits. Not choreographed, padded movie hits, but actual collision hits from people who knew how to play football. And during one of those sessions, he sustained a stinger injury. For those who don't know, a stinger is a nerve injury that sends a burning or electric shock sensation shooting down your arm when the neck or shoulder takes certain kinds of impact. It is one of the most common and most uncomfortable injuries in football. For Reeves, given his prior neck surgery, this was not a minor inconvenience. It was genuinely concerning, and yet he kept going. He did not shut the training down. He did not retreat to the comfort of stunt doubles and camera tricks. He pushed through, because Shane Falco would have pushed through, and Reeves had already decided that the line between himself and the character was going to be as thin as possible. Fact 15. He studied John Elway to build Shane Falco's throwing style. Here is a detail that reveals just how deep Reeves went into this role. When developing how Shane Falco would look throwing a football, the mechanics, the confidence, the physical presence behind each pass, Reeves studied NFL Hall of Famer John Elway. He examined how Elway held himself in a huddle, how his body moved in the pocket, how he released the ball, and how he commanded the respect of everyone on the field purely through the energy he brought to each play. Reeves was not just trying to throw a football, he was trying to become, for the duration of filming, the kind of man who had earned the trust and respect of an entire team. And he used one of the greatest quarterbacks in history as his blueprint. How many actors go that far? How many actors study a Hall of Famer to play a fictional quarterback in a comedy? Fact 14. The movie was directly inspired by the 1987 NFL players' strike. Everything in this film traces back to one real and deeply controversial moment in professional football history. In 1987, NFL players walked off the field over a labor dispute centered on pay and free agency rights. The league was staring down the loss of major television deals and millions of dollars in revenue. With real players refusing to suit up, team owners did the unthinkable. They started recruiting replacement players, semi-professionals, retired veterans, and players who had been cut from rosters were suddenly being handed NFL game jerseys and told to go compete. For 3 weeks in October of that year, these makeshift teams took the field, and one of those teams, the Washington Redskins, won every single one of their replacement games, went on to finish the season as champions, and won the Super Bowl. The team that was patched together with discarded players ended up winning the whole thing. That story is the emotional engine under the hood of the replacements. The Washington Sentinels in the film are a fictional echo of that real, almost unbelievable chain of events. Fact 13. The quarterback drama in the film mirrored a real 1987 rivalry. The fictional tension in the film around which quarterback deserves to lead the team was not invented for dramatic effect. It was drawn from a real quarterback situation that unfolded during that 1987 season. The Washington Redskins faced an actual battle at the quarterback position between Doug Williams and Jay Schroeder, a rivalry with real stakes, real tension, and real consequences. The filmmakers used that dynamic as a model for the internal conflict in the movie, which means even the interpersonal drama you watch on screen has roots in documented NFL history. This was not a movie that made things up for entertainment. It was a movie that took real things and translated them into fiction, which is a very different creative act. Fact 12. Gene Hackman initially turned down the role of Coach McGinty. When filmmakers approached Gene Hackman about playing Coach Jimmy McGinty, he said no. This needs to sit for a moment. The man who became the emotional spine of the entire film, the performance that anchored everything around it, almost never happened. Hackman had already played an iconic sports coach in Hoosiers, the 1986 basketball drama that became one of the most beloved sports films ever made. He was concerned about being typecast, about repeating himself, about stepping back into a role that might look like he was retreading old ground. A two-time Academy Award winner with a legacy that stretched across decades had real reasons to be selective. He was not going to take a role just because a studio called him. The filmmakers had to go back to him with a more detailed argument. They had to explain exactly why McGinty was different, why this coach was not the screaming, intense, larger-than-life archetype, but instead something quieter and more complicated. McGinty was a man who genuinely believed in second chances. He was calm where other coaches were explosive, reflective where others were reactive. He saw the overlooked players not as charity cases, but as people with something real left to offer. That pitch convinced Hackman. And once he signed on, he did not just show up, he transformed the film. Fact 11. Hackman played the role completely seriously, and that was the whole point. When Gene Hackman arrived on set, he did not play Coach McGinty as a comedic character. He played him as though this were a genuine NFL drama with real stakes and real consequences. He behaved on set the way an actual professional coach would behave, disciplined, focused, and absolutely committed to the process. And this was not a mistake or an actor misreading the tone of the film. It was a deliberate choice, and it was perhaps the most brilliant creative decision made during production. Because here is what happens when you put a completely serious, completely grounded, completely real character in the center of total chaos. The chaos becomes funnier. Every moment of absurdity around McGinty was amplified because he refused to acknowledge it as absurdity. He treated every broken-down misfit on that roster as a real professional who owed him their best. And when a man like Gene Hackman looks at you with total conviction and expects something from you, it is hilarious and terrifying at the same time. His seriousness made the comedy work on a level that a typical comedic performance never could have achieved. Fact 10. Keanu Reeves wanted the emotional tone to be serious too. Hackman was not alone in his serious approach to a comedic film. Keanu Reeves made the same creative decision, though for slightly different reasons. Reeves saw Shane Falco not as a funny character, but as a genuinely wounded one. Falco had failed publicly and spectacularly. He had carried that failure for years. He had watched the world move on while he was stuck in the same moment of collapse, floating out on that boat, barely existing. When the chance came to step back onto a real field, Falco was not excited. He was terrified. He was hopeful in the way that people are hopeful when they have been disappointed so many times they almost do not allow themselves to feel it. Reeves played that. He played the hurt and the hesitation and the desperate, aching desire to prove something. And that emotional honesty is why the movie's funnier moments land so hard, because underneath them, you feel the weight of a real human story. The director later said that without Reeves playing Falco seriously, the film would have collapsed into pure silliness. With him grounded in real emotion, everything else had something to orbit around. Fact 9. Real ex-NFL players were cast as replacement players on screen. The production team made a decision early on that separated the replacements from nearly every other football film. They did not want actors pretending to play football. They wanted football players who happened to be on camera. So when it came to casting the Sentinels and the opposing teams, they actively recruited real athletes with genuine professional and semi-professional football backgrounds. Men who had played the game at high levels, who knew the language of the sport from the inside out, who moved the way football players move because they were football players. The result was something you cannot fake with training or clever editing. The plays looked real. The blocking was real. The routes ran by receivers were the correct routes, timed correctly, adjusted correctly at the line of scrimmage. Directors of photography were able to pull back and shoot wide, long, sustained shots of actual football being played because the athletes on screen could actually play football. That is an almost impossibly rare thing to achieve in a sports film, and it gave the replacements a visual authenticity that most films in the genre still have not matched. Fact 8. Jim McMahon served as football consultant and taught play calling. Among the real football figures brought in to shape the film's authenticity was Jim McMahon, the legendary Chicago Bears quarterback who led his team to Super Bowl glory in the 1985 season. McMahon worked on set as a football consultant, and his primary job was teaching the actors, particularly Keanu Reeves, how real quarterbacks communicate with their teams. This is more complex than most people realize. The play calling system in the NFL involves a coded language of colors, numbers, and words designed to signal specific plays to teammates while simultaneously confusing the defense. It is a system that takes real quarterbacks years to master. McMahon broke that system down, explaining the logic and the rhythm of how a quarterback commands a huddle, and Reeves absorbed it all to the point where he was calling plays in character with the fluency of someone who had been doing it for years. Fact 7. The game sequences were filmed at M&T Bank Stadium, home of the Baltimore Ravens. When you watch the football games in the replacements, you are not watching a cleverly dressed studio set or a college stadium with NFL logos digitally inserted. You are watching actual professional game footage shot at M&T Bank Stadium, the genuine home of the Baltimore Ravens, which had opened only 2 years before filming began in 1998. The production team secured access to this real NFL facility and used everything it offered. The locker rooms are real, the sidelines are real, the lighting rigs, the scoreboard, the press boxes, the tunnel the players walk through before stepping onto the field. All of it is authentic professional football infrastructure. Keanu Reeves described the experience of stepping onto that field under the stadium lights as genuinely transformative. The scale of the facility, the atmosphere it created, the visceral feeling of being a quarterback on a real professional field. It changed how he moved, how he spoke, how he carried himself. You can see it on screen. There is a physical confidence in his performance during the game sequences that comes directly from the environment in which those sequences were shot. Fact 6. The play-calling jargon was researched with real NFL coaches. The authenticity of the language in the film was not accidental. Beyond Jim McMahon's consultation work, the production brought in actual NFL coaches to review how plays were being called and to make sure the terminology hitting the screen was accurate to what real professional teams use. When Reeves shouts out a play call in the huddle, what you are hearing is not invented movie language. It is a real play-calling format, the kind of coded instruction that real quarterbacks deliver on real fields. This level of dedication to accuracy was driven by the knowledge that the film's story was rooted in genuine NFL history. If the language had sounded fake, the whole world being built on screen would have cracked. The filmmakers were not willing to let that happen. Fact 5. The game sequences were edited like action films, not sports broadcasts. Here is something that separates The Replacements visually from almost every other football film of its era. The editor approached the game sequences not as sports footage, but as action sequences, using the same cutting rhythm and kinetic energy that you would find in a high-stakes thriller or an action blockbuster. Quick cuts from one angle to another build pressure before every snap. The transition from wide stadium shots to intimate close-ups of faces and hands and collisions is jarring and deliberate. Slow motion is deployed not for sentiment, but for impact, to let you feel a hit before the cut moves forward. This approach works because the footage underneath it is real. Because genuine athletes are making genuine plays, the editor had material worth cutting. Fake plays shot with camera tricks do not have the same raw physicality, and no amount of editing can manufacture it. The combination of authentic action and aggressive cinematic editing produced football sequences that raised the bar for the entire genre. Fact 4. Test audiences wanted more romance, and the filmmakers listened. After early test screenings, feedback came back with a consistent note. Audiences wanted more from the romantic storyline between Shane Falco and the head cheerleader. The connection existed in the film, but it felt underdeveloped, almost accidental, like something the movie noticed rather than built. Viewers wanted to feel the chemistry deepen, They wanted the emotional investment to be mutual and visible. The filmmakers took that feedback seriously without letting it overpower the film. Rather than adding dramatic, romantic set pieces that would have thrown off the film's tone, they went back in and added small, precise moments, meaningful looks that lasted a beat too long, quiet scenes that let the two characters simply exist near each other. The changes were surgical. They added emotional weight without adding runtime, and they worked, because even those small additions gave the audience a personal stake in whether Falco and the people around him came out the other side of all this in one piece. Fact 3. The stadium crowds were mostly real fans, with a clever trick to make them look bigger. The stadium scenes feel massive and alive because they largely were, rather than relying on the computerized crowd technology available at the time, which in 1999 was still far from convincing. The production hired thousands of real local fans as paid extras to fill the stands of M&T Bank Stadium. These were people who showed up, sat in their sections, and reacted to the action on the field the way real fans react, because many of them were real fans. The energy was not manufactured, it was genuine, and the cameras captured it. To make the crowd look even larger than it was, the production used a clever repositioning technique. Between takes, groups of extras were moved from one visible section to another, so that the same people appeared to be a different crowd from a different angle. Combined with post-production editing that reused and layered crowd shots from multiple angles, the finished film gives the impression of a completely packed professional stadium. This was creative filmmaking at its most resourceful, using real human energy and smart production management to achieve something that CGI at the time simply could not have matched. Fact 2. Keanu Reeves reportedly took a pay cut of up to 90% so Gene Hackman could be cast. Slow down, read that again. Keanu Reeves, who at the time was one of the most commercially bankable actors on the planet following the success of The Matrix in 1999, reportedly offered to give up as much as 90% of his own salary so that the production could afford to cast Gene Hackman as Coach McGinty. The exact figures were never officially confirmed, but multiple sources close to the production pointed to an enormous voluntary sacrifice by Reeves. The studio had a mid-level sports comedy budget that did not have room for a two-time Academy Award-winning legend. Reeves made room. He did this because he admired Hackman genuinely and because he understood something that not many actors are willing to admit, that the film would be better with Hackman in it than with more money in Reeves's own pocket. And this was not the first time Reeves had made this kind of decision. He had previously taken a pay cut on The Devil's Advocate to help secure Al Pacino for that film. There are very few actors in Hollywood history, at any level of success, who have repeatedly done what Keanu Reeves has repeatedly done. He bet on the quality of the work over the size of his paycheck, twice, and both times he was right. Fact 1. The NFL refused to support the film, and the filmmakers built an entire fictional league in response. Here is where everything comes together, and it is the most audacious story in this entire list. The National Football League looked at The Replacements, a film built on one of the most uncomfortable chapters in league history, and said no. No to licensing their team names, no to their logos, no to the use of the NFL brand anywhere in the film. The 1987 strike was too raw, too politically charged, too deeply associated with a labor dispute that had pitted owners against players in a way the league still did not want publicly revisited. Supporting a film that celebrated the replacement players who crossed the picket line during that strike was something the NFL simply was not going to do. Most productions would have crumbled under that kind of institutional refusal. Without NFL branding, how do you make a football film feel like it exists in the real world of professional football? The answer, it turns out, is that you build your own world from the ground up. The filmmakers created an entirely original professional football universe. The Washington Sentinels do not exist anywhere in real life. Every uniform, every logo, every team name, every league identifier you see in the film was designed from scratch specifically to avoid stepping on NFL intellectual property while still capturing the visual and emotional feel of the real thing. The fictional league does not carry the NFL name. The teams do not carry NFL team names. And yet the film feels completely authentic. The stadiums are real. The plays are real. The athletes are real. Everything underneath the branding is legitimate professional football. And that is what the NFL could not take away. The filmmakers took a refusal and turned it into an opportunity to create something more original than a standard licensed production. The result was a film that felt real without being real, that honored the game without the game's permission, and that captured something true about second chances and overlooked talent without needing a single NFL logo to do it. 21 facts. 21 moments where the story behind The Replacements turns out to be just as compelling as the story on screen. A star who gave away nearly his entire salary. A legend who almost said no. A league that tried to shut it down and instead inspired something more creative. Real players on a real field in a real stadium, fighting for a story rooted in real history. Here is the question worth sitting with. How many of the movies you love have this kind of story underneath them? How many films that you have watched a dozen times are carrying secrets this wild, this human, this worth knowing? The Replacements was never just a football movie. It was a movie about people who were told they were not good enough, and about what it looks like when those people refuse to accept that answer. That message lives in every frame, and now you know exactly where it came from. If this changed the way you see the film, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Drop in the comments which of these facts hit you the hardest, and if there's another film you want us to dig into, tell us below. Pain heals, chicks dig scars, glory lasts forever. See you in the next one.